Welcome to the channel about news from around the world. While you subscribe and like it, we're going to start.
Centenarian Henry Kissinger met with Xi Jinping a day after U.S. Climate Ambassador John Kerry, another former U.S. Secretary of State, wrapped up a trip to China. Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who recently turned 100, is in Beijing for a surprise visit this week. The patriarch of U.S. diplomacy met Chinese leader Xi Jinping on Thursday, a day after U.S. climate envoy John Kerry wrapped up his trip to resume climate talks with China. Xi Jinping met with Kissinger at the state guesthouse. The meeting came after Kissinger met with China's top diplomat Wang and Defense Minister Shanfu, who is under U.S. sanctions over China's purchase of Russian weapons. Kissinger's meeting with Xi Jinping shows how highly he is regarded by China's leadership. His previously unannounced visit coincided with John Kerry's high-profile visit to Beijing, during which the U.S. and China resumed climate talks that had been frozen for nearly a full year. Notably, Kerry, who is also a former U.S. Secretary of State, was not granted an audience with Xi Jinping, despite being a sitting member of President Joe Biden's current administration, and some observers had anticipated in advance that such a face-to-face meeting might take place. Henry Kissinger, who said he came to Beijing as a friend of China, played a key role in paving the way for the establishment of U.S. diplomatic relations with Communist China half a century ago during the Nixon administration. As U.S. climate envoy John Kerry was wrapping up his four-day visit to China on Wednesday, China's top diplomat Wang met with former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, an old friend of the Chinese people who made historic contributions to the watershed development of Sino-U.S. relations, according to China's Global Times. During the meeting held in Beijing, Wang urged the U.S. government to change its current policy towards China, which is now characterized as containment and suppression. The Chinese official also expressed hope that the U.S. policy towards China would have Kissinger-style wisdom and Nixon-style political courage, which was seen by experts as a clear message Beijing has conveyed to Washington. Kerry and Kissinger became the latest U.S. officials or senior public figures to visit China after trips by some top U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, signaling an accelerated resumption of high-level engagement between the two countries as bilateral ties hit a peak. Historical low due to a number of issues such as Washington's misguided and provocative actions on the Taiwan issue, and improperly, some experts said the resumption of a number of high-level communication channels between the two countries sends a positive signal that differences have been brought under control and bilateral ties are not going off the rails. The recent resumption of high-level interaction between the two countries could also pave the way for a possible meeting between the two heads of state in the second half of 2023, possibly during the G20 Leaders Summit or the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, some experts said. But where the bilateral relationship will head in the long term remains uncertain, given that domestic politics in the U.S. remain toxic and Washington is unlikely to change its unhealthy policies towards China. Wang said the current U.S. policy toward China is aimed at transforming China or containing China, which will not succeed and is doomed to failure. Wang conveyed this message to the Biden administration during his talks with Kissinger, urging current U.S. officials to show political courage and adjust their China policy. Some Western media described the 100-year-old former Secretary of State's visit to China as unexpected, and media reports on Tuesday quoted the U.S. State Department spokesman as saying that the Biden administration was aware of his plan to travel to China. The outstanding significance of Kissinger's visit is that it played a role in the usual channel of communication to resolve the issue, but it is unrealistic to expect that such a visit could produce any immediate results. It is no secret that military talks between China and the U.S. are not going smoothly due to a series of negative moves by the U.S. against China on military and security issues, including the existing sanctions on the defense minister, Lee Haydon notes. But Kissinger could play an unofficial role in helping to remove some of the obstacles, paving the way for possible future talks. On the day he wrapped up his visit to China, Kerry met with Chinese Vice President Han Zheng on Wednesday, saying that the climate issue should be treated as a standalone challenge, despite diplomatic difficulties in recent years, and that the climate problem requires a collective effort by the two countries to solve. It is unrealistic to separate the climate change issue from the overall bilateral relationship, as the climate issue is a major theme in U.S. policy toward China. The main outcome of Kerry's visit is to reopen a channel of communication on the issue, which will help him understand China's principles and bottom line on the climate topic, said expert Li Haidong, noting that such knowledge will help the Biden administration to reconsider the country's climate cooperation with China in the future.
Thank you for watching. If you're interested, subscribe and leave a comment.